Hey everybody, it's Tom coming to you today to talk about Franz Brentano, or more fully, Franz Clemens von Brentano. A very interesting chap, lived from 1838 to 1917, and significant for our purposes because he's, as it were, the grandfather of phenomenology due to his influence on Edmund Husserl. Uh, Apart from that circumstance, he's additionally important because beyond Husserl, he influenced many people that would go on to form what is sometimes referred to as the Austrian school um, and philosophy. He's also important within the development of psychology, where he's one of the individuals who really sort of pushed for the development of experimental psychology, trying to link it to an empirical basis. Now, what he meant by an empirical basis was some slightly different than what is often heard when we use that phrase. I'll turn to that in just a moment. Um, he is also important in the history of logic because he was in conversation with the peoples in the middle to late 19th century and forward to early 20th century um, to try and move beyond the classical forms and reform the Aristotelian framework. And with people like Frege, this really got underway with symbolic logic and teasing out more exactly what the relationship is between the domains of logic and mathematics. Just to very quickly gloss what Brentano's assertion was in that sphere, he believed it was an error to understand the act of judgment as an association or a predication. So when you say the ball is red, you're predicating of the ball that it has this particular color. There is this connection of ideas. He did not believe that the establishment or the assertion of that connection was the real function of judgment. By contrast, he believed the real function of judgment was existential claim, the assertion that something is the case. To use a turn of phrase that comes after him, and with this in mind, he sort of elicited some unexpected conclusions about what were the sort of four classical categories of logical proposition that were inherited from Aristotle, often sort of illustrated by a square of opposition. You have, well, I don't want to make a silly mistake while I'm talking, so what I'll do is I'll put a link to that in the comment section below. But sort of to render it very, very basically, you have the idea that there's the universal everything is X, right? Or nothing is X. There is something that is Y or X, or there is no uh, X, which is Y, or these. That's the sort of feel of it. And apologies for that crude relay. And again, I'll put a link to elucidate that below. You get drawn into some technicalities there, and I don't want to be detained by them, in part because my own training in that connection is limited, but also because the real focus is on the significance of Brentano for phenomenology. And so let's go ahead and turn to that now. As I mentioned, he was involved in research. I think I mentioned this. Researches around trying to place psychology on an empirical basis. I didn't actually say that. There was a previous take, and I mentioned it in the previous take. So I'm going to bring this up right now. The what he means by experience, and he's influenced here by people like David Hume and the British empiricists, an influence which is interestingly juxtaposed with his his deep study of the scholastics, and more pointedly, Aristotle, whom he considered an empiricist in essence, is a return to really our first person experience. With respect to psychology, by terming that empirical, he is inflecting it in a way that is different than the manner in which the term is often heard to our contemporary ear. To our contemporary ear, what is sound empirically is evidence, if you like, which can be confirmed consensually, that is, vis a vis third person interaction. Okay. He's not really going along that direction. He's going along the direction of scrutinizing in a rigorous way the manner in which we encounter the world subjectively from the first person standpoint. And when you take up that project, which he termed the project of descriptive psychology, you are placed in a situation where you are actually abstracting, and he didn't make this claim explicitly, but the distinction which I'm about to mention is really anticipatory of certain things which occur with Husserl. What you're essentially doing is you're setting aside issues of what he felt was under the domain of genetic psychology, as he termed it. What he meant by genetic psychology were those directions in psychology which were trying to establish what would be the material or physical basis of psychological phenomena, neurology, and so forth. But Brentano felt that you couldn't really get that project underway in a promising fashion without elucidating what is really happening within the mental domain per se. Absent clarity about what's really happening in the mental domain, it will become difficult to establish a coordination between whatever is taken up by genetic psychology and what's actually happening in mental life. So, in the interest of realizing that clarity, he makes a crucial assertion as to what constitutes mental phenomena. You look at experience, and you are tempted to draw a distinction between physical phenomena and mental phenomena, as he puts it. And there are some unfortunate ambiguities about his usage of the language, but we can sort of just let those be for the moment, because it's actually relatively straightforward colloquially what we mean by physical phenomena, things that we encounter in our mental life, things like colors, sounds, sensory phenomena, right? Tactile encounter, taste, smell, and so on. And not simply those, right? You can sort of also, this is where sometimes he's a little ambiguous. He'll refer to something like hearing a chord, which is not simply a sound, but the perception of a relationship of distinct tones or sounds. Or he refers to the encounter of a landscape as a physical phenomenon, and or composite objects, which do not, which insofar as we encounter them as composite objects, implies that there's something more than barely physical about them. However, in relationship with this array of experiences or phenomena that we can designate as physical by way of indicating that they are out there, there are also mental phenomena. And what are these? He goes through a list of candidates for what distinguishes specifically mental phenomena from the physical phenomena that we have hashed out so far. And things like thinking, in a sense, perception itself, feelings, all of this can sort of be subsumed under what he refers to or has been characterized as his view that life has the mental life has a tripartite structure. The three parts being, in the first place, presentation. Everything is based on presentation, something presenting itself to our mind or our mentality, whether that be an object, a feeling, and so forth, right? The second term is judgment, and that connects what he's doing here in part with his efforts in the logical domain. The third part is emotionality, in essence, feelings of love and hate, as he would sometimes put it. But the latter two categories, judgment and emotionality, are themselves fundamentally grounded in presentation, which draws us to what he establishes as the real criterion which distinguishes physical phenomena from mental phenomena. And that criterion is the quality of intentionality, the intentional relation. Or sometimes he would later in his career refer to it as a kind of quasi or pseudo relation, because you can get tangled into some semantic briar patches if you don't allow for a certain relaxed usage of the concept. But what does he mean by intentionality? He means that there is a reaching out or an apprehension or movement toward some object. Any mental act has an aboutness to it. So you're seeing, you see something. You're hearing, you hear something. Now we already designated things like sights, sounds, feelings as themselves physical phenomena. But the distinction is between the encounter of these sights, sounds, feelings, and seeing, hearing, and feeling. It's the seeing, the hearing, the feeling which represents the real activity of the mental. And it always reaches out to an object. When you think about something. And really, it's very difficult to get around the power of this distinction. And on the basis of this distinction, you say, well, what you do then is you proceed from having sort of established the significance of intentionality to be able to sort of sift the wheat from the chaff, and you work out what is the consequential, if you like, architecture of mental life more fully. And so you do then sort of run into some sort of metaphysical curiosities here. Because what is the status, if you like, of the object which is apprehended in a mental act? When you're seeing, what is that which you see? Or when you're thinking, what is that about which you're thinking? So if you're thinking about a unicorn, does that unicorn have a kind of reality to it? Well, some people think, well, just in virtue of that you're thinking about it, it becomes untenable to say that there is an irreality to it. Um, and some people really get caught up in this issue that we can evidently entertain existence, which shouldn't be allowed into the ambit of our universe. Squared circles and other impossibilia as opposed to possibilia. I'm not going to go all the way down that road, but it's a very live controversy or topic, especially later on with the within the analytic line. Um, but in any event, this notion of intentionality, conjoined with this notion of a tripartite structure of life, is really what in turn would inspire Husserl. And in fact, so like as far as Brentano was concerned, he actually saw the debate to which I just alluded as to the ontological status of mental objects in their relationship with objects out in the real world. It's sort of almost missing the point. And the way he put it is like, look, if you're going to marry someone, you're going to actually marry a person. You're not going to marry your mental image of that person. If you're talking about a horse, you're talking about the horse. You're not talking about your image of the horse, whether that be ideate. You're not talking about the ideation. And there's a kind of common sense on which he was grounding that position, which is challenged by some other people. And Husserl himself sort of disagreed with Brentano on those points in ways which will become more explicit when we get into Husserl himself. But I just wanted to acknowledge the importance of Brentano, who introduces this notion of intentionality to clarify, what is specifically mental about our experience, our conscious life, and it, by virtue of that specification, move toward elucidating what the proper object of psychological research should be, descriptively, with the promissory note of, on the basis of that description, that empirical foundation, set up correlations with the physical universe, biochemistry, etc., etc., etc. And so that's the big picture with Brentano. And I hope these remarks have been somewhat helpful. And I just want to acknowledge his import for the ideas which we are now going to go ahead and take up in subsequent videos about Husserl, Heidegger, Merleau-Ponty, etc. So thank you so much for listening. Of course, feel free to like if you wish, comment, share, subscribe, all the rest of it, and have a lovely day. I'll see you guys later.